The whiskey bottle shattered against the saloon wall 3 inches from Clara Bennett's head. And in that moment, she realized her carefully constructed life in Tombstone, Arizona territory, had finally crumbled to dust. It was June of 1881, and the silver mining town buzzed with enough genuine scandals that Clara had foolishly believed her own quiet existence would escape notice. She had been wrong. The bottle thrower was Margaret Whitmore, the banker's wife, her face twisted with righteous fury as she screamed accusations that painted Clara as a homewrecker, a loose woman who had supposedly carried on an affair with Margaret's husband. The crowd in the Oriental saloon fell silent, every eye turning toward Clara as she stood frozen, her basket of mended shirts clutched against her chest. "You stay away from decent folk," Margaret shrieked, her voice carrying through the suddenly quiet room. "Everyone knows what you are. Everyone knows what you did back in Missouri before you came here pretending to be respectable." Clara's throat closed. She had never met Margaret's husband beyond a polite nod on the street. She had never been to Missouri. But the lie had been spoken in public, witnessed by 50 people, and in a town like Tombstone that made it truth. She did not defend herself. She had learned long ago that words meant nothing against the momentum of gossip. Instead, she turned and walked out of the saloon with her head high, even as her hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped her basket. Behind her, the whispers started immediately, a rustling sound like rattlesnakes in dry grass. The lies had actually begun 3 weeks earlier, though Clara had not known it at the time. She had been sitting in the small room she rented above the general store, working by lamplight to finish hemming a dress for one of the saloon girls when the first rumors started circulating. Mrs. Whitmore, it seemed, had discovered her husband making regular withdrawals from their account. Rather than confront him directly, she had looked for a scapegoat and found Clara, the young seamstress who had no family, no husband, and no one to defend her name. The story grew with each telling. By the second day, Clara had supposedly been seen leaving the Whitmore house at midnight. By the fourth day, she had allegedly received expensive gifts. By the week's end, the tale had expanded to include 3 other married men and a past in Missouri involving a murdered lover. None of it was true. All of it was believed. Clara watched her seamstress business disappear within days. The respectable women who had brought her their mending suddenly found other options. The saloon girls still came, but their coins barely covered her rent. She walked through town with her eyes straight ahead, ignoring the deliberate way other women crossed the street to avoid her, the way conversations stopped when she entered the general store, the way men looked at her now with speculation instead of respect. She was 22 years old, and she was drowning. The cowboy first saw her on a Wednesday morning in mid-July, standing outside the assayer's office with that same basket clutched against her body like armor. He had just ridden in from 3 months working a cattle drive up from Texas, his pockets heavy with wages and his mind set on a hot bath, a good meal, and maybe a few days of cards before heading back out. His name was James Hendricks, though most people called him Hawk for his sharp eyes and the way he could spot a stray calf from half a mile away. He noticed her because she was beautiful, with dark hair pinned up under a simple bonnet and eyes the color of creek water in spring. But what caught his attention was the way she held herself, spine straight and chin up, even as 2 women walked past her and deliberately bumped her shoulder hard enough to make her stumble. Hawk watched as Clara steadied herself without a word, watched as the 2 women laughed loud enough for her to hear, watched as she took a breath and continued walking as though nothing had happened. There was something in that moment, in the quiet dignity of her response, that made him curious. "Who is that?" he asked the man standing next to him, a grizzled prospector named Caleb who seemed to know everyone's business. Caleb spat tobacco juice into the dust. "That is Clara Bennett. Pretty little thing, but do not waste your time. She is trouble with a capital T. Been carrying on with half the married men in town, or so they say." Got a past back in Missouri, too, something about a man who died under suspicious circumstances. Hawk looked at Clara again, watched the way she walked with careful steps, the way she kept her eyes forward but her shoulders tense, always aware of her surroundings. He had known a lot of women in his 30 years, good ones and bad ones, honest ones and scheming ones. The scheming ones did not walk like that. They did not carry themselves with that particular brand of exhausted dignity. "Who says all that?" Hawk asked. Caleb shrugged. "Everyone. Started with Mrs. Whitmore, but others have confirmed it. Where there is smoke, there is fire." Hawk did not respond, but he filed the information away. He had been on enough trail drives to know how stories grew in the telling, how a simple incident could become legend by the time it passed through a dozen mouths. He had also learned to trust his instincts, and his instincts said the woman walking away with her head held high was not what people claimed. He saw her again that evening at the boarding house where he had taken a room. She lived in the building next door, and he watched from his window as she climbed the outside stairs to her room above the general store. She moved like someone who was tired down to her bones, and when she reached her door, she paused for just a moment, her hand on the doorknob, her head bowed. Then she straightened, unlocked the door, and disappeared inside. Hawk made his decision that night. He did not know why exactly, could not have explained it if someone had asked. Maybe it was because he had been an outsider himself more than once. Maybe it was because he had a sister back in Texas, who had been the subject of vicious gossip after her husband died, leaving her alone with 2 children and a failing ranch. Maybe it was simply because Clara Bennett looked like she needed someone on her side, and Hawk had never been able to walk away from someone who needed help. He started asking questions the next day, careful questions posed to the right people. The saloon girls told him Clara was kind and paid fairly, and never looked down on them like other so-called respectable women did. The general store owner said she always paid her rent on time and gave him no trouble. The elderly Chinese laundry owner said she had helped his wife when she was sick, sitting up all night with her when no one else would enter their shop. The married men Clara had supposedly seduced. One of them had been out of town for 2 months during the time he was allegedly carrying on with her. Another had never met her. The third, when Hawk cornered him in the livery stable, admitted with shame that his wife had invented the whole story to cover up her own spending on a gambling habit. As for Missouri, Clara had never been there. She was from Kansas, from a small farming community that had been burned out by raiders during the border conflicts. She had come to Tombstone 3 years ago with a family who later moved on to California, leaving her behind with a skill for sewing and a determination to make her own way. The more Hawk learned, the angrier he became. Not the hot anger that led to bar fights, but the cold, settled anger of someone who understood injustice. Clara Bennett had been destroyed by lies, pure and simple, and the town had been all too willing to believe them because she was alone and vulnerable. He thought about moving on. His business was his own, after all, and he had learned long ago not to get tangled up in other people's problems. But every time he decided to saddle up and head out, he would see Clara walking through town with that same quiet dignity, or hear another vicious whisper, or watch another door close in her face, and he would stay one more day. It was August before he actually spoke to her. He had been watching her regular routes through town, learning her patterns the way he would study a trail, and he made sure to be at the well in the morning when she came to draw water. She approached with her bucket, saw him standing there, and immediately altered course to use the other well 2 streets over. Hawk followed her. She walked faster. He lengthened his stride. "Miss Bennett," he called out, "I would like a word, if you please." Clara stopped, but she did not turn around. "I do not know you, sir, and I have nothing to say to anyone. My name is James Hendricks. People call me Hawk, and I know you do not know me, but I have something to say to you, and I would appreciate it if you would listen." She turned then, and he saw the weariness in her eyes, the deep exhaustion of someone who had been fighting for too long. If you are here to proposition me or insult me, please just do it quickly so I can go about my day." "I am here to do neither," Hawk said. He took off his hat, holding it against his chest. "I am here to tell you that I know the stories about you are lies, all of them. I have spent the last 3 weeks checking, and I know the truth." Clara stared at him. For a long moment she said nothing, and he watched emotions flicker across her face too quickly to name. Then her eyes filled with tears, though none fell. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you do that?" "Because someone needed to," Hawk said simply. "Because it was not right, because I could," she shook her head slowly. "It does not matter, the truth does not matter anymore, the lies are what people believe. Then we will make them believe something different. We," Clara laughed, a brittle sound with no humor in it. "There is no we. You are a stranger, and I am grateful for your kindness, truly, but nothing you say will change what this town thinks of me. I have accepted that. I am saving money to leave to go somewhere else and start over." Hawk took a step closer. "What if you did not have to leave? What if you could stay here and hold your head up and make every person who lied about you choke on their words? That is not possible." "It is." He took a breath, knowing what he was about to say would sound insane. "Marry me." Clara's bucket slipped from her fingers, hitting the ground with a thud. "What? Marry me?" Hawk repeated. "Not for real, not in the way that matters, but for show. Give me 6 months to make this town see the truth about you. Let me stand beside you and make them understand they were wrong. After 6 months, if you want to leave or if you want the marriage annulled, we will do it. But at least give it a chance." "You are insane." But she did not walk away. "Probably," Hawk agreed. "But I am also right. You are being destroyed by gossip because you are alone. But if you have a husband, a respectable cowboy with money in the bank and a reputation for straight dealing, people will have to reconsider. They will have to question the lies." "Why would you do this?" Clara asked again. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," Hawk said, and he meant it. "I want nothing from you except a chance to help set this right. I have money saved. I can rent us a proper house. You can have your own room, your own space. I will not touch you or expect anything from you. I just want to help." Clara studied him for a long moment, and Hawk let her look. He knew what she would see. A tall man with sun-weathered skin and calloused hands, honest eyes and a straightforward manner. He was not handsome in a conventional way, but he was solid and real. "This is the most ridiculous thing anyone has ever suggested to me," Clara said finally. "Is that a no?" She picked up her bucket, filled it from the well, and turned back to face him. "If I say yes and this is some kind of cruel joke, I will never recover. You understand that? I am barely surviving as it is. I cannot take another blow." "It is not a joke," Hawk said. "I give you my word." Clara looked at him for another long moment, and then, so quietly he almost missed it, she said, "Yes." They were married 3 days later by the justice of the peace, with the saloon keeper and his wife as witnesses. Hawk wore his best shirt, and Clara wore a simple blue dress she had made herself. The ceremony took 5 minutes, and when it was over, Hawk slipped a plain gold band on Clara's finger and said, "Thank you for trusting me." Clara looked down at the ring, then up at him, and for the first time since he had met her, she smiled. It was small and uncertain, but it was real. The news spread through Tombstone like wildfire. By evening, everyone knew that the scandalous Clara Bennett had married Hawk Hendricks, the cowboy who had just come back from a successful drive with money to spare. The reactions were mixed. Some people were skeptical, convinced it was some kind of scheme. Others were confused, unable to reconcile the image of a loose woman with a respectable marriage. A few were outright hostile, including Margaret Whitmore, who declared loudly that Hawk would soon discover what kind of woman he had shackled himself to. Hawk heard the gossip and ignored it. He rented a small house on the edge of town, a neat 2-room structure with a kitchen and a separate bedroom. He bought furniture, basic but well-made, and he set up the bedroom for Clara with a good mattress and clean linens. He took the kitchen floor for himself, rolling out his bedroll each night as he had done on 100 trail drives. Clara moved in with her few possessions, still uncertain, still waiting for the trap to spring. But Hawk was exactly what he had promised to be. He was polite and respectful. He gave her space. He made sure she had everything she needed and asked for nothing in return. Slowly, carefully, he began the work of rehabilitating her reputation. It started small. Hawk made a point of walking through town with Clara on his arm, greeting everyone they passed with a friendly nod. When people tried to avoid them, he stopped them for conversation, casual and easy as though there was nothing unusual about any of it. He introduced Clara as his wife with pride in his voice, and he dared anyone with his eyes to say something disrespectful. No one did, not to his face. He made sure they were seen at church on Sunday, sitting in a pew near the front. He held the hymnal for Clara and sang in a pleasant baritone, and when the sermon was over, he shook the preacher's hand and thanked him for the service. The preacher, who had been among those most vocal in condemning Clara, looked distinctly uncomfortable. Hawk also started spreading the truth, carefully and strategically. He had drinks with the men in town and let slip, as though in confidence, that he had investigated the rumors about his wife before marrying her and found them all to be false. He mentioned, casually, that he had spoken to the men Clara had supposedly been involved with and heard their denials. He noted, as though it were common knowledge, that Mrs. Whitmore had a gambling problem she was trying to hide. He did all of this without accusation or anger, just stating facts in his calm, straightforward way. And because Hawk had a reputation as an honest man, because he had no reason to lie, people began to listen. Meanwhile, Clara was discovering something unexpected. She was discovering that she liked being married to Hawk, even in this strange, unconventional arrangement. He was easy to live with, tidy and considerate. He made coffee in the mornings and left it warming on the stove for her. He fixed the loose board on the front step without being asked. He brought home fresh vegetables from the market and presented them to her with the awkward pride of someone unused to domestic gestures. More than that, he talked to her. In the evenings, after dinner, they would sit on the front porch and he would tell her stories about the trail drives, about the men he had worked with and the places he had seen. He had a gift for narrative, painting pictures with his words, and Clara found herself laughing for the first time in months. She told him about her own past, the real one, about growing up on a Kansas farm and losing everything when the raiders came. She told him about learning to sew from her mother, about the determination that had driven her to Tombstone and the hope she had felt when she first arrived. She told him about the fear that had consumed her when the lies started, the helplessness of watching her life disintegrate. Hawk listened to all of it, never interrupting, never judging. When she finished, he said quietly, "You are one of the strongest people I have ever met." Clara felt something shift in her chest, a warmth she had not felt in years. By September, the tide was beginning to turn. The constant presence of Hawk, his obvious respect for Clara, his steady refutation of the rumors, all of it was having an effect. People were starting to question the gossip. A few of the braver women began to nod to Clara on the street again. The general store owner mentioned that he had heard the stories about her were exaggerated, but there were still holdouts, still people who clung to the original narrative. Margaret Whitmore was the worst, continuing to spread poison whenever she could. She told anyone who would listen that Hawk had been tricked, that Clara had seduced him with feminine wiles, that the truth would come out eventually. Hawk decided it was time to end it. He chose a Saturday evening when he knew the saloon would be crowded. He walked in with Clara beside him, her hand tucked into the crook of his elbow. The room quieted as they entered, dozens of eyes turning their way. Hawk led Clara to the bar and ordered 2 sarsaparillas. Then he turned to face the crowd, his expression calm but his voice carrying authority. "I know there has been talk about my wife," he said. "I know there are people in this town who believe she is something other than what she is. I am here tonight to set the record straight once and for all." The room was silent. Even the piano player had stopped. Every story you have heard about Clara Bennett is a lie, Hawk continued. Every single one. I know because I investigated them myself before I asked her to marry me. I spoke to the men she supposedly had affairs with. None of them had ever been alone with her. I checked the story about Missouri. She has never been there. I traced the origin of these lies back to their source, and I know why they were told. He turned his gaze on Margaret Whitmore, who was standing near the back of the room with her husband. Mrs. Whitmore, you invented these stories to cover your own gambling debts. Your husband was withdrawing money from your account because you were losing it at cards, not because he was giving it to my wife. Instead of admitting the truth, you destroyed an innocent woman's reputation. Margaret's face went pale, then red. That is a lie, how dare you? It is not a lie, her husband said quietly, and the room erupted in whispers. He looked defeated, worn down. It is true, I should have said something sooner, but I did not want to embarrass you. I am sorry, Miss Bennett. Mrs. Hendricks, I am truly sorry. Margaret looked around wildly, seeing the judgment in every face. Then she turned and fled from the saloon, her husband trailing behind her. Hawk turned back to the crowd. My wife is a good woman. She is kind and hardworking and honest. She has been treated shamefully by this town, and it ends now. Anyone who has something to say about her can say it to me. No one spoke. Hawk nodded. Good, then we are done here. He took Clara's hand and led her out of the saloon, out into the cool evening air. Clara was shaking. I cannot believe you did that. Someone needed to, Hawk said. He looked down at her, his expression soft. You deserve to have someone fight for you. Clara felt tears streaming down her face, but they were different from the tears she had shed before. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of something deeper she was afraid to name. Thank you, she whispered. Hawk wiped her tears away with his thumb, his touch gentle. You do not need to thank me. But Clara was realizing something in that moment, something she had been trying to ignore for weeks. She was not just grateful to Hawk, she was falling in love with him. The realization terrified her. This was supposed to be temporary, a business arrangement with an end date. Hawk had been clear about that. He was helping her, nothing more. He did not want a real marriage, did not want the complications that came with actual feelings, but her heart did not care about logic or agreements. Her heart only knew that Hawk had been kinder to her than anyone in her life, that he made her laugh and feel safe and seen. Her heart knew that she looked forward to seeing him each morning, that she loved the way he smiled at her when he thought she was not looking, that she dreamed about him at night in ways that made her blush. She could not tell him. She had agreed to 6 months, and she would honor that agreement. If Hawk wanted to end the marriage after that, she would let him go, no matter how much it hurt. But for now, for these precious remaining months, she would allow herself to enjoy being his wife, even if it was only pretend. The weeks that followed were the happiest Clara had known in years. The town's attitude toward her changed completely after the scene in the saloon. People greeted her warmly on the street. Women began bringing her sewing again, apologizing for believing the lies. The preacher's wife invited her to join the church sewing circle. Clara felt like she could breathe again, but more than that, her relationship with Hawk was deepening. They spent their evenings talking for hours, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Hawk told her about his childhood in Texas, about losing his parents to fever and raising his younger sister on his own. He told her about his dreams of buying his own ranch someday, of having a place to call home instead of drifting from job to job. Clara told him about her own dreams, about wanting to open a proper dress shop, about the designs she sketched by lamplight. She showed him her drawings, hesitant and shy, and his face lit up with genuine admiration. "These are beautiful," he said, studying each sketch carefully. "You have real talent, Clara. You should do this. You should open that shop." "It takes money," Clara said. "More than I have." "We will find a way," Hawk said, and the casual way he said we made Clara's heart flutter. They began to touch more small casual gestures that felt enormous to Clara. Hawk's hand on the small of her back as he guided her through a doorway. Clara's fingers brushing his as she handed him his coffee. the accidental contact of their knees under the small dinner table. Each touch felt electric, charged with an energy Clara could not ignore. She caught Hawk watching her sometimes, his expression thoughtful, almost tender. She wondered if he felt it too, this connection growing between them, or if she was imagining things because she wanted them so badly. October arrived with cooler temperatures and brilliant blue skies. Hawk had taken a job at a nearby ranch, breaking horses, work that paid well and allowed him to come home every evening. Clara had reopened her seamstress business, now with more clients than she could handle. In the evenings, they worked side by side, Hawk repairing tack and Clara sewing, comfortable in companionable silence. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Clara gathered her courage. "Hawk, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you really do this? Marry me, I mean." "The truth." Hawk was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "At first I told myself it was because it was the right thing to do, because I do not like bullies and I do not like seeing innocent people hurt. That was true, but it was not the whole truth." "What is the whole truth?" He turned to look at her, his eyes serious. "The whole truth is that from the moment I saw you, you fascinated me. The way you held your head high even when the world was against you. The strength in you. The grace. I told myself I was helping you, but really, I think I was looking for an excuse to be near you." Clara's breath caught. "Hawk, I know we agreed this was temporary," he continued. "I know you have every right to leave when the 6 months are up. But I need you to know that somewhere along the way, this stopped being pretend for me. Somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you." Clara felt tears welling in her eyes again, but these were tears of joy. "It stopped being pretend for me too. I love you, Hawk. I think I have loved you for weeks now, maybe longer." Hawk reached out and took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Then stay, not because of an agreement or because you owe me anything, but because you want to. Stay and be my wife for real this time." "Yes," Clara whispered. "Yes, I will stay." Hawk leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Clara did not want to pull away. She met him halfway, her lips finding his in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. "I should probably court you properly now," Hawk said. "Take you to dinner, bring you flowers, all the things I should have done before I married you." Clara laughed. "I think you did things a little out of order." "Just a little," Hawk agreed. He kissed her again, longer this time, deeper, and Clara felt warmth spreading through her entire body. That night, Clara did not sleep in the bedroom alone. She and Hawk lay together in the darkness, fully clothed but wrapped in each other's arms, talking until the early hours of the morning about everything and nothing. They talked about the future they would build together, about the ranch Hawk wanted to buy and the dress shop Clara would open. They talked about children someday, about growing old together, about all the years stretching out before them. As dawn began to lighten the sky, Clara realized that she had never felt so completely, perfectly happy. The next few months passed in a blur of contentment. Hawk continued working at the ranch, saving every penny he could. Clara's business thrived and she began setting aside her own money for the dress shop. They were building something together, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. In December, Hawk came home one evening with news that made Clara squeal with delight. He had found a property for sale, a small ranch about 5 miles outside of Tombstone. It had a house, a barn, good grazing land, and a creek that ran year-round. The owner was moving east and wanted to sell quickly. The price was fair, and with their combined savings, they could afford it. "There is even a building that could be converted into a shop," Hawk said, his eyes shining. "You could have your dress shop right there on our own land. Women could come out from town, make a day of it." Clara threw her arms around him. "It is perfect. It is absolutely perfect." They bought the property in January of 1882 and spent the next month fixing it up. The house needed repairs, and the barn needed a new roof, but they worked together, often with help from neighbors who had become friends. The same people who had shunned Clara months before now brought food and tools and labor, ashamed of how they had treated her and eager to make amends. Clara forgave them. She understood how easy it was to believe a lie when everyone else believed it too. What mattered was that the truth had won in the end, and she had Hawk to thank for that. They moved into the ranch house in February, and Clara felt like she was finally, truly home. She set up her sewing room in the spare bedroom, with good light from the windows and space for all her supplies. Hawk built her a large cutting table and shelves for fabric. He even made her a sign for the shop building, Clara's dress shop, painted in neat letters. At night, they shared the bed in the main bedroom, and their marriage became real in every sense of the word. Hawk was a gentle, passionate lover, and Clara discovered a depth of feeling she had never known existed. They learned each other's bodies and hearts, becoming partners in every way. By spring, Clara realized she was pregnant. She told Hawk one evening as they sat on the porch of their new home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I am going to have a baby," she said softly. Hawk turned to her, his eyes wide. "A baby, truly, truly." He let out a whoop of joy that probably carried all the way to town, then scooped Clara up and spun her around, laughing. When he finally set her down, his expression was tender. "I love you so much, Clara. I cannot believe how lucky I am." "I am the lucky one," Clara said. "You saved me, Hawk. You gave me back my life." "We saved each other," Hawk corrected. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "And now we are starting our family." Their son was born in November of 1882, a healthy boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. They named him Matthew, and he became the center of their world. Clara balanced caring for him with running her dress shop, which had become successful beyond her wildest dreams. Women came from Tombstone and the surrounding ranches to commission dresses, and Clara's designs became known throughout the territory. Hawk expanded their ranch, buying more cattle and hiring 2 hands to help with the work. He was a fair employer and a skilled rancher, and the business prospered. On Sundays, they loaded Matthew into the wagon and drove into town for church, where they were greeted warmly by everyone they met. The Whitmores had left Tombstone shortly after the confrontation in the saloon, unable to face the shame of the truth. Clara felt sorry for them but also relieved. She did not want reminders of that dark time in her life. Sometimes, visitors would come to the ranch, people who had heard the story of how Hawk had married Clara to save her reputation. They would ask if it was true, if he had really married a stranger just to silence the gossips. Hawk would always smile and put his arm around Clara. "I married her because I saw who she really was," he would say. "And I fell in love with the strongest, kindest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. Saving her reputation was just an excuse to make her mine." Clara would blush and lean into him, never tiring of hearing those words. As the years passed, they had 2 more children, a daughter named Rose and another son named Samuel. The ranch continued to prosper, and Clara's dress shop became an institution. They built a good life together, filled with hard work and laughter and love. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Hawk took Clara back to Tombstone for dinner at the finest restaurant in town. As they walked down Allen Street arm in arm, Clara thought about that day so long ago when a whiskey bottle had shattered against the wall and her world had fallen apart. "What are you thinking about?" Hawk asked, noticing her distant expression. "About how different everything is now," Clara said. "About how you changed my life." "We changed each other's lives," Hawk said. He stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I was drifting before I met you, Clara. I had no real purpose, no real home. You gave me both. You gave me everything." Clara reached up and cupped his face, her thumb brushing across his cheekbone. "I love you, Hawk Hendricks. I will love you until the day I die and beyond. And I love you, Clara Hendricks, forever." They kissed there on the street, not caring who saw, and Clara felt a surge of pure happiness. She had been destroyed by lies and gossip, reduced to nothing by the cruelty of strangers. But Hawk had seen the truth when no one else would. He had married her, stood beside her and fought for her until every whisper was silenced. More than that, he had loved her. He had given her a home, a family, a future. He had given her back herself. As they continued their walk through town, greeting friends and neighbors, Clara reflected on how much had changed. She was no longer the frightened, isolated woman who had cowered from judgment. She was a successful businesswoman, a loving wife, a devoted mother. She was respected and admired, and the lies that had once defined her were forgotten, buried under the weight of years of truth. That night, as they lay in bed in the hotel room Hawk had rented for their anniversary, Clara traced patterns on his chest with her fingertips. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Marrying me the way you did, taking on all that trouble?" Hawk caught her hand and brought it to his lips, kissing her fingers one by one. "Not for a single second. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Clara." She smiled and kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. They made love slowly, tenderly, celebrating a decade of marriage and looking forward to all the decades still to come. The next morning, they returned to the ranch, where their children rushed to greet them with hugs and excited chatter about everything that had happened while they were gone. Clara gathered them close, breathing in the sweet scent of their hair, marveling at the family she and Hawk had created together. That evening, as the sun set over their land, the whole family gathered on the porch. Matthew, now 9 years old, was teaching his younger siblings a song he had learned in school. Rose, at 6, was dancing to the music, her dress twirling around her legs. Samuel, just 4, was trying to copy his brother's words but mixing them up in adorable ways. Hawk sat in his rocking chair with Clara perched on the armrest beside him, his arm around her waist. They watched their children play, and Clara felt a peace so profound it almost hurt. "This is everything I ever wanted," she whispered. "Me too," Hawk said, pulling her closer. "Me too." As darkness fell and the stars began to appear overhead, the family went inside for dinner. The children were noisy and messy, spilling milk and arguing over who got the last piece of cornbread, but Clara would not have changed a thing. This chaos, this noise, this life was hers, and it was perfect. After the children were in bed, Clara and Hawk sat by the fire, sipping coffee and enjoying the quiet. Clara was working on embroidery for a client, and Hawk was reading the newspaper. It was a scene of domestic tranquility, so different from the drama and pain of their early days. "Do you ever think about how we started?" Clara asked, not looking up from her embroidery. "How strange it was, all the time," Hawk admitted. "But I do not think it was strange. I think it was meant to be. I think I was always supposed to find you, and you were always supposed to be mine." Clara set down her embroidery and moved to sit in his lap. He wrapped his arms around her, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "I used to think I was cursed," she said softly. "Losing my parents, losing my home, and then the lies. I thought God had forgotten about me. And now I think I was being prepared for something better. All that pain led me to you, and I would go through it all again if it meant ending up here in your arms with our children sleeping down the hall." Hawk kissed the top of her head. "You are the bravest person I know, Clara. Not everyone could have survived what you went through and come out still kind, still hopeful." "I had you," Clara said simply. "You made all the difference." They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other and the warmth of the fire. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of pain. Years continued to pass, bringing both joys and challenges. There were hard winters and dry summers, sickness and worry, the normal trials of life. But through it all, Clara and Hawk remained partners, facing everything together with the same strength that had gotten them through those early days. Their children grew, each developing their own personalities and dreams. Matthew showed a talent for ranching and often rode out with his father to check on the cattle. Rose inherited her mother's eye for fashion and spent hours in the dress shop, learning the trade. Samuel, the youngest, had a gift with horses and could gentle even the most skittish animal. Clara's dress shop expanded, requiring her to hire 2 assistants to keep up with demand. She designed dresses that were shipped as far away as San Francisco and Denver. Hawk's Ranch became one of the most successful in the territory, known for quality cattle and honest dealings. They became pillars of the community, the couple everyone pointed to as an example of true love and partnership. People forgot, as people do, the scandal that had once surrounded Clara. The younger generation did not even know about it. To them, Mrs. Hendricks was simply the elegant woman who ran the dress shop, married to the respected rancher Hawk Hendricks. On their 20th anniversary, the town threw them a party. It seemed like half of Tombstone showed up at the ranch, bringing food and music and laughter. The children, now young adults, helped organize everything, determined to celebrate their parents properly. As Clara looked around at the crowd of well-wishers, at the people who had once shunned her but now called her friend, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude, not just for their acceptance, but for the journey that had led her here. The pain had been real, but so was the joy that followed. The lies had hurt, but the truth had prevailed, and through it all there had been Hawk. Her champion, her partner, her love. He found her standing alone for a moment, watching the celebration from the porch, and came to stand beside her. "Happy anniversary, my love," he said, handing her a glass of lemonade. "Happy anniversary," Clara replied, clinking her glass against his. 20 years. Can you believe it? Sometimes it feels like forever. Other times it feels like yesterday that I saw you outside the assayer's office with your basket and your brave face," Clara laughed. "I was terrified that day, terrified every day back then. But you never showed it," Hawk said. "You were always so strong. I had no choice." "We always have choices," Hawk said gently. "You chose dignity over bitterness. You chose hope over despair. You chose to trust me when every experience you had told you not to trust anyone. Those were brave choices, Clara." She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him. "I would choose you every time, in every life, in every circumstance. I would always choose you." "And I would choose you," Hawk said. He turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. "You know what the best part of these 20 years has been?" "What?" "Watching you bloom. When I first met you, you were like a flower that had been stepped on, crushed but not quite destroyed. And over the years, I have watched you straighten up, spread your petals, and become even more beautiful than you were meant to be. That has been my privilege, Clara. Being there to witness your transformation." Tears streamed down Clara's face. "How do you always know exactly what to say?" "I just tell you the truth," Hawk said simply. He wiped away her tears with his thumbs. "I love you, Clara Hendricks. I have loved you for 20 years, and I will love you for 20 more and 20 more after that, and however many more God gives us." "I love you too," Clara whispered. "More than words can say." They kissed long and sweet, and when they finally broke apart, they heard cheering. Their children and all the guests had gathered to watch, applauding the kiss. Clara blushed, but Hawk just laughed and took a bow, making everyone laugh louder. The party continued late into the night with music and dancing and stories. Old friends shared memories, and new friends marveled at the tale of how Hawk and Clara had met. The story had taken on a romantic sheen over the years, the painful parts softening into narrative, but the core remained true. A cowboy had seen a woman being destroyed by lies and had married her to save her reputation, only to discover he was saving himself too. As the guests finally began to leave, tired and happy, Clara and Hawk stood by the gate, thanking each one for coming. When the last wagon had rolled away and the children had gone to bed, they walked back to the house hand in hand. "What a night," Clara said, exhausted but content. "What a life," Hawk corrected. He pulled her close and they stood in the moonlight, 2 people who had weathered storms and emerged stronger. Clara thought about the girl she had been 20 years ago, broken and desperate, and she barely recognized her. That girl had been reshaped by love, by partnership, by the simple act of someone choosing to stand beside her when the world stood against her. Hawk had given her more than his name or his protection. He had given her the chance to become who she was always meant to be. And in return, she had given him a home, a family, a purpose beyond drifting from job to job. They had saved each other. That was the real truth. As they went inside and prepared for bed, moving through the familiar nighttime routine they had perfected over 2 decades, Clara felt nothing but contentment. There would be more years ahead, more challenges and joys, more moments of laughter and tears. But whatever came, they would face it together, just as they always had. In bed, wrapped in Hawk's arms in the darkness, Clara whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible. For believing in me when no one else did. For loving me even when I could not love myself." Hawk tightened his arms around her. "Thank you for letting me. Thank you for trusting me with your heart. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me." They drifted off to sleep, 2 hearts beating in rhythm, 2 lives woven so tightly together that it was impossible to see where one ended and the other began. The years ahead would bring more grandchildren, more success, more quiet evenings on the porch watching sunsets. They would grow old together, silver-haired and hand in hand, still partners after all those years. And when people asked them the secret to their long, happy marriage, they would always say the same thing. They chose each other every single day, through good times and bad, through lies and truth, through every whisper and every silence. Because in the end, that was what love was. Not a grand gesture or a dramatic rescue, though their story had both. Love was the daily choice to stand beside someone, to believe in them, to fight for them. Love was seeing someone at their worst and choosing to stay. Love was building something beautiful from broken pieces. Hawk had silenced the whispers by marrying Clara, but what he had really done was give her a voice again. He had reminded her that she mattered, that her truth was more important than other people's lies, that she deserved happiness and respect and love. And Clara had given Hawk something just as precious. She had given him a home, not just a physical place but an emotional one. She had given him someone to care for, someone to build a future with, someone who saw all of him and loved every part. They had started as strangers brought together by circumstance, but they had become soulmates through choice and effort and unwavering commitment. Their love story was proof that even the darkest times could lead to the brightest futures, that kindness could change lives, that choosing to stand up for what was right could create ripples that lasted a lifetime. As the moon rose over their ranch, casting silver light across the land they had built together, Clara and Hawk slept peacefully, their hands still joined even in dreams. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, but they would face them as they faced everything. Together, partners in every sense of the word, 2 people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. The whispers that had once tried to destroy Clara were long forgotten, replaced by stories of love and loyalty and the power of one person believing in another. And if you had asked anyone in Tombstone or the surrounding territory who the most respected couple was, they would have said without hesitation, Hawk and Clara Hendricks, the rancher and the dressmaker, whose love story had become legend. That was the truth that mattered. Not the lies that had tried to define Clara, but the life she and Hawk had built on a foundation of trust and love. And that truth would last forever, passed down through their children and grandchildren, a legacy of choosing love over fear, truth over lies, and each other over everything else.